Hello and welcome to episode 114 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast where two friends stopped arguing about movies and started working through them together. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. As we continue filling in gaps in our movie-watching history, we're watching a movie I've never seen from one of the greatest all-time filmmakers, Martin Scorsese and his 1999 frantic drama Bringing Out the Dead. Now, we're cheating a little bit on our concept since this is a movie Ryan has seen, but for the life of him, he can't remember anything about it. As huge fans of Scorsese, we were embarrassed to have any of his films still hanging out on our watch list. And with his newest movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, coming out this fall, we jumped at the chance to prepare by watching one of his lesser-known films.
For a movie that revolves around people who fall through the cracks of society, it might be fitting that Bringing Out the Dead became one of Scorsese's forgotten movies. It was a box office flop, bringing in only $16 million on a $55 million budget. Critics were lukewarm, though the reviews were better than the audience reception. Bringing Out the Dead also has the dubious honor of being the only Scorsese movie of the 90s not to get an Oscar nomination. And nearly 25 years later, Bringing Out the Dead still hasn't seemed to find any real audience.
But does that just mean that so many people are just plain wrong and missing out on a classic?
Or did Marty get a little too arty for his own good and fail to save this movie? Keep listening.
Lied from behind the door and looked into my eyes.
I had to concentrate to keep my mind from wandering off on these short trips. It was the neighborhood I grew up in and where I'd worked most as a paramedic, and it held more ghosts per square foot than any other.
Your little starstruck innuendos.
All right, so there's a scene from the movie we're discussing today, a pretty early on scene in the movie. That is Frank Pierce, as played by Nicolas Cage, doing a little bit of his monologue, which kind of runs throughout the movie. But a paramedic doing a short trip back to the hospital. You're being introduced to him in this stage of really kind of being burnt out in his job as a paramedic. And the movie goes from there.
Yeah, it's interesting to start with a man near the end of his rope, and that's it. Then we'll see if he reaches the end of it.
Yeah. But that is Bringing Out the Dead, and which we are picking as another part of our gap year project we've been undertaking this year. This is a Scorsese gap film, which I was really excited to catch up with. I know technically you had seen this, Ryan.
Yeah, I don't even know when I saw it, and I didn't remember much about it.
And before we really dig into it, I am curious though, did watching it dig up any of those memories, or was it really kind of like, wow, this really is like I've never seen it before?
It really was more or less like I hadn't seen it before.
Okay.
Yeah. I had totally forgotten John Goodman was in it. I had forgotten about the cast, and it's a
stellar cast.
Amazing cast, especially it's like a who's who of 1999 for sure.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm very, very glad we're watching it again because I almost feel bad saying I had seen it before.
Okay. Maybe that would be a good place to start, though, is either why I hadn't seen it or why you didn't seem to remember it that much when you had. Now, did you see it when it came out, though?
No. It was in one of those, clusters of just, this movie. And I think what I do remember is either somebody saying to me or reading. It was probably somebody saying to me, like, oh, that one is actually good. Like it's worth seeing, because I think my thoughts about it had been what everybody said about it, which was like nobody says Bringing Out the Dead is up there with the ones that you should see.
Well, and in fact, if you see like ranked lists of Scorsese films, it usually hovers around the bottom a lot of times.
Yeah, the bottom I was actually just checking that, and the two lists I had just looked at while we were sitting here had it like pretty much in the bottom middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what. So this is 99.
Yep.
I had seen some Scorsese even by then. I mean, I was still only in high school.
99, I had not.
No? Okay. So, I mean,
it.
By then I had seen... Well, let me say, okay, so Gangs of New York had not come out just yet, but I had seen Goodfellas by then. I had seen Casino by then.
I think the first Scorsese I watched was Raging Bull.
Okay. And I didn't see that till quite a bit later, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I do remember seeing the trailer for this movie, and I was actually a big Nicolas Cage fan because I loved The Rock and Con Air.
Yeah.
So like Michael Bay, Nicolas Cage was where I was at that time in my life.
You weren't maybe ready for Martin Scorsese, Nicolas
And I do
Cage.
think though, that if the movie had blown up, if it had been a success, I probably would have seen it because I was that much of a Nicolas Cage fan and I had seen enough Scorsese. But it was just that movie of Scorsese's that just kind of came and went. And even later on, as I was catching up with Scorsese, it was always one of those where I was like, yeah, maybe someday I'll get to it.
Yeah. Well, I know I've talked about Joel Siegel and his
your Good Morning America family.
My Good Morning America.
Was he not a fan?
I don't think he was. Like I think I remember him like showing clips, and just the sense I remember getting was that this was a weird movie. So whether it was Joel Siegel or not, I got that sense.
Yeah.
That like, oh, this movie was a miss. It was kind of a weird one. Just not like, try again, Scorsese.
Yeah, for whatever reason, there just seemed to be a lot working against this movie.
Yeah.
I did not know who Paul Schrader was at the time, so that wouldn't have been an appeal factor for me at all. But it's just kind of surprising that even now, I think it took me a long time to even know that he wrote the movie. Or I should say co-wrote, based on a Joe Connolly novel.
Right, yeah, adapted a novel.
Yeah, adapted it.
He certainly wouldn't have been a draw for me. Even in 1999, I didn't quite know who Martin Scorsese was.
But even by 99, I had already seen Last Temptation of Christ.
Wow, geez.
A couple times.
Wow, what? How old were you in 1999?
I was 16. I saw 17? That movie for the first time when I was like 13 or 14 because my dad was in that Passion play where he was playing Judas, and he was doing it for like preparation for his character. We talked about that in one of our past episodes. Yeah. So even okay, so by 99 I would say I'd probably seen Last Temptation maybe twice. The thing with me and Scorsese at that point was that I just knew that I found his movies thoroughly entertaining to watch. And they always left me with just this like little bit of like mystery to them, I guess. Sure. Well, especially Last Temptation, where I was just kind of like, that movie's just weird. And it makes me think in a way that cinema at that time had not really done. You know, I mean, I know that movie has plenty of detractors who don't like it at all.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, I feel like that is a movie that is made for thinking. Yes. You are supposed to think about that movie.
Right. Yeah. I remember, so I've mentioned her before, but the theater director in high school that I had, her name is Ann Johnson. She was an English teacher and theater director, and she had such a huge influence on my early interest in movies. But as somebody who liked acting, she knew like, oh, you should watch this movie, like this performance, like these sorts of things, you know, were kind of the in for me. And so I remember she mentioned like Raging Bull. She said like, oh, recently this group named Raging Bull the best movie of the 80s. I picked up the VHS at the library, and I still had to run things by my parents if they were going to be like checking them out with me. And I was like, oh, this is rated R. And I wasn't putting it together. It's from like the 80s. I'm like, but it's in black and white. So like,
remember when you were that age and black and white just meant old?
Right. And I was like, I showed my mom was like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, it's Raging Bull. I'm like, it's rated R, but it's black and white. So it's probably pretty old. And she was like, yeah, and I think R ratings were different back then, right? And I was like, yeah, right. And then I watched it and I was like,
that's so funny.
Oh, 1980. Oh yeah, an R rating is just an R rating. Like what? Like
the black and white. I guess it can just be a choice.
What? Oh, there's color too.
Wait. They had color. They had color.
This could have been color the whole time. But no, I really like Raging Bull, and then I watched Gangs of New York in the theater, and like, you know, it kind of kickstarted everything. But it was certainly at that time, Bringing Out the Dead was still only had detractors, and it almost currently still only has detractors.
The thing that I think for me is really important about Scorsese is Spielberg was probably the first time I paid attention to who a director was.
Yeah.
But I think Scorsese was the second. And Scorsese was like the adult version of that for me. Where it was like Spielberg was kind of like my coming of age, more younger, teenage, like, oh, there's a person who's making all these movies I like.
Yeah.
And then there was like, oh, there's kind of an adult version of that in Scorsese. Like these adult movies that are made for they're made for adults and for people who want to think about the movies they're watching and be entertained.
Right.
And there's, you know, a person behind that. That was maybe one of the first times beyond Spielberg where I actually sought out movies because a certain person made them.
Right.
And so Scorsese for me is always going to have that really special place where he opened up a whole kind of new world to me.
Yeah. For me, it was probably like around the same time Scorsese and David Fincher and P.T. Anderson.
Yeah. Those would come soon after, very soon after.
Yeah. We kind of walked through our personal Scorsese history.
All right, well, yeah, so then we got that out of the way. But
do you have a Letterboxd rating on your first viewing?
Yeah, this is it's kind of a bizarre thing because I did really like this movie. I would probably give it between a 4 and a 4.5. But I will say that I struggled a little bit as I was watching it. And we'll get into maybe where it redeemed itself for me. But it is such a Scorsese movie.
Yep.
It's such a Paul Schrader movie. And it's such a Nicolas Cage movie. It is all three of those things, and I love all three of them. And it is all three of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's just as much any one of those.
At times in really good harmony, and at times with some sandpaper, like friction to it. But I think ultimately it makes it better.
But I can see why the movie didn't click with everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know. What was your experience like?
Well, prepare for a fight. Because I also said 4.5.
Geez, one of these days we will disagree, right?
Yeah,
maybe
if we need to, if it happens. But I think I came around to it maybe quicker, and it might be because I watched it in 2 nights. Maybe you watched it in 2 nights too.
It was it's just the reality of my life right now. Right. It was a couple different sittings for me, and I wish it wasn't that way. And if I had to watch it again, I'd probably make myself sit down and watch it in one sitting.
Yeah, and so as it started, I was like, "Oh, this is a lot." And then
it sure is.
And then as it went on, I stopped it. I basically stopped it 2/3 of the way through after the Ving Rhames section, and I kind of spent the day sort of just working it over in my head. And then when I went back to it the second day for arguably a much crazier third than the previous 2/3, even as crazy as those are, I felt like I had kind of entered the space to watch that movie better. And I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I felt like thinking about it as a Martin Scorsese movie in the context of the other movies, because I think people can do that in a really negative way that's sort of like, well, this is like Taxi Driver, but I like Taxi Driver better, so I don't like this movie.
As good. Yeah.
I feel like this movie is in much more conversation with the other films that Scorsese has made than maybe some other ones, because I kind of felt like there are ways to compare it to other movies, or at least see it as an offshoot of some of his other movies.
There's a dialogue, I think, that's definitely going on.
Right. On top of the fact that it is visually so remarkable that, like, I'm thinking in 1999, how could you not at least see that no one made a movie like this?
Right.
Ever. And certainly not at the time. And I'm looking at the Oscar nominees for that year. And if these were the kinds of movies that people were interested in,
and are thinking were the cream of the crop of that year.
Yeah, that this movie doesn't fit there. The only possible exception would be Being John Malkovich.
Okay. Well, what else do we got?
So the Cider House Rules, The Sixth Sense, American Beauty, Boys Don't Cry, The End of the Affair. Did I ever say The Insider? There was a Woody Allen movie, Sweet and Lowdown, Girl Interrupted, The Talented Mr. Ripley, The Hurricane, The Straight Story. I feel like all of those are very conventional, with some outliers like Being John Malkovich, like Magnolia, but otherwise, like, Meryl Streep for Music of the Heart. It's very
pedestrian.
Yeah, I guess so. Because like The Matrix came out that year, and it was only nominated for like effects stuff and editing stuff. But like Thelma Schoonmaker wasn't nominated for an editing Oscar, which feels like she absolutely should have been.
Of course, yeah.
The Green Mile that year, like that was what was capturing attention. I see why Ebert compared it to Fight Club, just because they're both so stylistic.
Right.
But I feel like, how could you watch this and not be excited by it? at the very least.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, it's especially in the editing and in the camera work, the actual movement of the camera. I will say though, one of the things I didn't like I just didn't like the way it looked.
It's very it's
super
dark.
It's super saturated, super high contrast, very dark. I couldn't tell if it was something that I didn't like because it felt a little dated to me, because I do think that was kind of a look. Fight Club has a little bit of that look to it.
Yeah.
What else? Maybe even a little bit of Moulin Rouge has a little bit of that look to it.
Definitely
just
saturated.
Saturated. That saturated kind of look. And this movie is like saturated, but without the color. It's just like really high contrast, saturated, with a lot of just blacks and grays and whites and reds. And, you know, I don't know if they were using a filter or what they were doing, but that was definitely like a somewhat sideways Scorsese choice, because this movie, even though it is New York, it is nighttime, it doesn't look like Taxi Driver.
No.
And it doesn't look like Mean Streets even. Mean Streets has a little bit of that red kind of tint to it.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver is beautifully shot, you know, actually. But I know this because I actually just watched both those movies, kind of to just get some context of, because this is nighttime New York Scorsese. This is sort of like, in that way, it is very much in his wheelhouse. But this has its own look to it, and I just don't like it as much as I like the other two.
And I can understand that, but I think when I talked about like watching this as a Scorsese movie, I couldn't help but admire the choice, because
it's
like, he went for something. He could have remade Taxi Driver at night with a
doing something different.
But it's one of the things that sets it apart and doesn't invite the comparison.
Right. And I mean, I shouldn't say there's no color. Like, there's the scenes at the Oasis that obviously have more color to them, and there's style there, right?
Well, there are scenes, and they definitely stand out.
They pop. They pop.
Both of them, two of the biggest ones, and I think two of my favorite scenes are scenes that revolve around the Oasis. The first one, and then like the sort of dream sequence that happens there. And then the second one is when he saves Psy, and the lights, like the sparks, and the way the city looks.
The fireworks, and
And those are both moments where he either thinks he will finally find relief and see beauty, or he is actually working his way towards relief and seeing beauty. So he uses those moments sparingly, but they're super important.
Well, and this is what I was going to get at, because I've never seen a movie like this, where I can actually tell you I didn't like the way this movie looked, but it had to be that way.
Yeah.
And the reason it had to be that way, and what redeemed the entire movie for me, was, you know, a little bit of those scenes, but honestly, it all clicked for me in literally the last scene.
Final shot.
I was like, that's why it was like that.
Yeah.
That is telling the arc of a character, that is telling character transformation through nothing but cinema, through nothing but the visual image, the image of you watching an entire movie of this dank, dark, gritty place that just seems like a hellscape.
Yeah.
And then through nothing other than just the change in the lighting and the camera, a moment of him just being close to another body, resting, and you actually see the filter taken away, like sort of the light coming in from the window, and the whole look of the movie changes. And it does by the end, before it kind of totally washes out. There's a moment where it does look like the end of the affair, or a movie like that.
Yeah,
you know, it's kind of like saying that choice was made for a reason.
Yeah.
That was his perception. That was his view. That was the way he saw the world. That actually maybe even is the way the world is. But here's a moment of warmth that to me was like, oh, that all makes sense. And that's actually a really bold choice.
Yeah.
To make a movie that actually doesn't look that good.
Yeah. It doesn't feel good to look at.
It doesn't feel good to look at. It's not visually pleasing in that way. In fact, there's something that's a little bit like, you know, maybe it's a little washed out. Maybe you should have dialed it back. Does this guy
know what he's doing? Right.
And then to be like,
final shot.
I've just never seen a movie where it was calling attention to the fact that, it didn't look that good. There was something not right about the look of that movie. You know,
and it shouldn't have looked right,
because there's something not right about the psyche of this person that you're in.
In Roger Ebert's review, which he gave 4 out of 4 stars, like he really loved it. He quotes Harry Knowles saying that you can enjoy a Scorsese film with the sound off or with the sound on and the picture off. And I haven't thought about that while watching other Scorsese movies, but you can absolutely say that about Bringing Out the Dead. I don't know if enjoy is the right word fully for this movie, but you get everything he's saying.
Yeah.
It takes a special filmmaker to do that, and you don't even realize really that it's happening. And it's a risk. Like he's swung for it and committed to it. And it was bold and it was brave, and it's why he is so amazing.
Yeah.
Like, that's why he is who he is.
Well, one of the lines I really loved from that Ebert review is right before that, where he says that how Scorsese's never an autopilot, never panders, never sells out, always goes for broke. And this is the part I love. To watch his films is to see a man risking his talent, not simply exercising it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. Of course, he knows how to make a beautiful, great movie, but if he wants to tell a different story or if he wants to try something different, he's so good that he's just going to risk it.
Yeah.
He's going to risk it all because he's that good.
Yeah.
Not just simply exercise, like flexing his muscles.
Right.
I don't ever feel like Scorsese's just flexing. I feel like he's playfully maybe trying something new, or like not even playfully, he's like exploring a thought he's had in a visual way. And it's always interesting. But it's not just him kind of showing off or saying it feels like he is just fully invested in this story. And if telling it in a better way means taking some really weird risk that might even kind of ostracize or like turn off some of your audience, like it's about the movie. It's about the story, you know?
Yeah. And he's incredibly thoughtful. I feel like every time I read about him in a movie and like something about it, he's had an idea for decades, and he has all these ideas, and I think he just finds the right time to do it, and like finds the project, like, oh, that's where this idea or this theme, even not just cinematic technique, but a theme or an idea or a type of character or a type of story.
Yeah. Well, and I always get the sense that he's always learning, and not even just learning like through what he wants to try, but he's just such a lover of film.
Yeah.
I remember, just actually not too long ago when I was reading where he was doing some kind of panel with Spike Lee, and they were talking about Black Klansmen, and just the way that Scorsese was he was so enamored with Spike Lee in that movie, the way that Spike Lee cut at the very end to documentary.
Yeah.
And that like Scorsese was just kind of like, it felt like he was learning from Spike Lee. Like it wasn't just, hey, I'm Scorsese and I'm championing this because I can. It's just like, I was blown away by your film.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's probably filing that away. And like, it's like, this guy showed me something.
Right.
And I feel like that's Scorsese, his whole life has been like, he himself is in a film school all the time and just learning things and filing them away and just loving cinema for what it can do. And he's never stale about it.
Right.
You know?
In an interview with Thelma Schoonmaker, who's edited so many of Scorsese's movies, the interviewer was talking about how Scorsese has such a deep knowledge and appreciation for film that he'll bring back old movies that have been forgotten for whatever reasons, like some of the politics of the day. A movie didn't get seen because somebody crossed someone, and like whatever, he would do that. And Schoonmaker said he doesn't only help older directors. When he sees a movie he likes by a young director, he writes to them and tells them that, which is such a wonderful thing for them. He has relationships with directors all over the world in the most remote countries. He keeps abreast of all that's going on in world filmmaking. He loves world filmmaking actually more than most filmmaking today. So he's got this wonderful ability to give back to those who've helped him become a director, and he helps young directors come along as well. Wes Anderson was one of them. He wrote to him immediately when he saw Bottle Rocket, and they've become dear friends.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Instead of like seeing people as competition, he sees them as teachers, people who can teach him and who he can collaborate with. Like they're his coworkers, right? Not just these, and that shows he's not out there to play the game. He's out there to advance cinema.
Right. What it can do.
And this movie did it, and everybody missed it. We all missed it.
So now we need to go back.
Right.
So then we should go back.
So we will save you, Martin Scorsese.
Right, exactly.
We're going to give you that hand up out of the pavement.
That's right. I'll be awaiting your letter if you're listening.
And so I guess I feel like we should probably focus on the movie.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of Scorsese. If it's not clear now, we like this guy's stuff.
This guy's all right.
We think he's got something. Write this name down. Martin Scorsese. He's going to be big.
Yeah, I got a feeling. Got a feeling about this guy.
So beyond the look of the film, if you were able to put your bias aside as you watched it, what are some of the things that grabbed you about it, or what stood out to you early on?
I think immediately what stood out to me was just how much of a Paul Schrader movie this was. Mm-hmm. And it's valuable to really think a little bit about this movie in the context of something like Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
It's also valuable to think about it in terms of some of his later work, like First Reformed, Card Counter, Master Gardener, which I haven't seen. And even to think about it in the context of something like Last Temptation of Christ. Mm-hmm. This being a guy who is at a bit of a crisis at the end of his rope, but also just about it being a job.
Yeah.
It's always, it's either a taxi cab driver, a priest, mm-hmm. a card counter, a gardener,
carpenter,
a carpenter, or I just mean even
Messiah.
In that sense, it's really just someone who in that sense feels called to be a religious leader.
Yeah.
What I find that Schrader seems to be really interested in, I think, is how what you do shapes the way you think.
And what you think shapes what you do.
Yes. In all of these movies, you've got the internal monologue, which is very philosophical usually, and it's usually hits on some ideas about spirituality, ideas about life,
purpose,
but it's always through this lens of what they're doing and how that shapes the way that they make sense of the world. And I do think it was actually just kind of spelled out in Taxi Driver, because I recently revisited after watching Bringing Out the Dead, but there's the scene where Travis is trying to tell this guy named the Wiz that he's having these bad thoughts, which is very similar to what Frank's going through. None of these people are kind of hiding about what they're going through.
Right.
They're very open. But in Taxi Driver, Travis is saying, I've got these really bad thoughts. I don't know what to do with them. And the Wiz says, a man takes a job. That job becomes who he is. You do a thing, and that's what you are. You get a job, and you become the job. I think Schrader's just really fascinated by what life is like doing different jobs.
Yeah, but I think what stands out to me more is that he is interested in people who believe they have a calling.
Right.
They have these higher aspirations, these higher values that transcend the job, but they think the job is the way to do that thing.
And in this case with Frank, you're talking about a guy who, it's pretty clear this is a person that does care about humanity.
Yeah. Well, he thinks his job is to save people.
Right. I guess what I was maybe thinking about is the dialogue that this movie has both with Taxi Driver and with Last Temptation of Christ. Frank as someone who also feels like they have a calling to save people. And you get the sort of burden that Willem Dafoe's Jesus character has in Last Temptation of Christ, where it's kind of like they just feel like they're always failing, even though they feel like it is a calling. And then you've got also a Taxi Driver, that whole sort of like New York environment that this shares, and just Travis's sense of there needs to be more order in this world. It needs to be cleaned up. Somebody's got to do it, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of that in Frank, but it comes from a little bit more of a place of compassion and also a place of futility by the end.
Right.
He's not going to resort to the tactics and the violence of someone like Travis Bickle.
Or Tom, his partner.
Or Tom is more like that. Yeah.
I mean, this isn't a Taxi Driver episode or a Last Temptation, but like we said, this movie is kind of in dialogue with the others. You've got people who think they need to save the world, basically.
Yeah. And by the way, this is in First Reformed, too.
You're right. Travis thinks he needs to do it by cleaning up the filth, but he never questions whether he's doing the right thing or not. Then you've got Jesus in Last Temptation, who debilitatingly questions whether he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then you've got Frank, who is so sure of what the right thing is, but can't do it, because he thinks for sure saving people means bringing them back to life or making them not die. By the end, it's not a question of are you succeeding or failing at saving people. It's what does it mean to save someone? And by the end, with Mary's father, he realizes that to save him is to let him die. Mm-hmm. And to save Mary is to let him die.
Right.
And so this whole thing where he's been torturing himself because he couldn't save one girl, which, by the way, was kind of his fault. He kept getting the intubation tube wrong.
Rose,
yeah.
The ghost character that keeps coming up in the movie.
And nobody would say he's wrong, that saving people's lives is the way to save people, right? But he's getting it wrong because he's putting this success or failure binary on it.
Yeah.
Of course, success is saving the life. Failure is losing the life. but it's way more nuanced than that. And because he doesn't see the nuance, whether it's because of who he is or because the job has ingrained it in him so deeply, he is tortured.
Yeah, well, I think we see him as he is realizing that the goal isn't necessarily to save people, because it's in that line where he says, I'm only here to bear witness.
Yes.
I realized that my training was useful in less than 10% of the calls, and saving someone's life was rarer than that. After a while, I grew to understand that my role was less about saving lives than about bearing witness. I was a grief mop. It was enough that I simply showed up. Except with Rose.
Maybe some of the other partners that he's had, the other EMTs that he's been working with, they've come to terms with that. That is the job.
Well, let's kind of pick them apart, because John Goodman has done it in a way that has made him callous to it.
Well, John Goodman to me it is a job. This is a job. I'm just as concerned about getting my beef lo mein as I am with saving the next person. It's just a job.
Maybe more so.
You're right. Yeah.
Like his joy kind of comes from what's his next meal going to be.
Right.
But he's also doing it because he's got to provide for his family. He doesn't sense a higher calling in it. And then you've got Ving Rhames, who senses a higher calling in a way that is not caring.
Right. Well, I feel like with the Ving Rhames, it's sensing a higher calling, but seeing your loss of any control in that, and that you're really just an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
The wind blew back up.
Yeah, the wind.
Oh, no, that was Jesus, son.
It was also the wind.
No, the wind my black ass, that was Jesus. Don't tell me about the good book now. I'll preach heaven and beat the hell out of you. Don't tell me that now.
All right.
I was going, son. If someone up on high, thank you, Jesus, hadn't have pulled me in.
Could you turn left here? I want to make a stop.
The point is, everybody go through a stretch where folks gonna die on you. Just don't meditate on it.
But he also is he's a drinker, and
he's reckless.
And he's reckless, yeah.
But he also has a very important line when they're talking about dealing with people, and he says, first comes love, second comes mercy. And I don't know if Frank wants to save people because he loves them. It feels a lot more selfish than that, or self-serving. But he did, I think, eventually come to see what it means to love someone when Tom beats Noel into a coma.
Right.
And he gives him mouth to mouth. The first time he's done that,
ever.
That was not a newborn.
Yeah, not an infant.
He learned to love Noel in that situation. And then he learned mercy when he let Mary's father die.
Right. And this is where you get a bit of that Schrader touch to it.
Hooking the EKG up to himself.
Yeah, instead of like Jesus' idea of sacrificing his life so others may live, it's Frank using his life so another's can be taken.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of this Schrader play on atonement.
Yeah.
You know? Which I thought was really fascinating. Like he actually is putting the heart monitor on him, saying like, use my life, basically.
Use my life so that you can slip away from yours.
So you can slip away from yours.
Yeah. And then I think Tom, is his name Tom, or am I just thinking Tom Sizemore?
No, I think his name's Tom.
Okay.
Yeah, his name, that's the last partner. That's
he is
the way he's dealing with it.
He's like the cautionary tale of what will happen if you keep on this path.
Right.
You know, you can't define failure that way and care so much about failing and keep your humanity. You are going to become a cynical, nihilistic shell. There's almost some logic to it. Like, if saving someone is the goal, you would kind of want to be in a situation where there are more people who need saving. So why not go out and beat people up? Why not break windows? Why not cause injuries so that you can save them? There's
a really interesting interview. It's one of the special features on the DVD with Scorsese. And he's kind of talking about what fascinated him about Joe Connolly's book. Which a lot of Joe Connolly's book, by the way, he was a paramedic in New York. And a lot of these stories, it's not like it's all happening in 3 days like in the movie, but they are sort of a compilation of things that he actually went through. In the movie, even, Frank talks about how saving a life can feel like a drug, better than a drug, that you'll be high for like a week off of saving someone's life. But what Scorsese found was interesting is he was pointing out what it does to your ego. And my sense is that Tom is someone who has the ego of what it means to save a life, But what Scorsese was saying is that a good paramedic, or the ones that last, are the ones that have to actually break through that ego and humiliate themselves down to where they actually have compassion, was the word he used.
Like giving someone mouth to mouth.
Yes. And that is such a powerful and important moment in that movie, is giving Noel mouth to mouth, because that's the moment of compassion. And again, this brings back, even going and bringing in a little bit of that dialogue with Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
This is ultimately Christ's realization as well. He's ready to be sacrificed because he understands what it means.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happening with Frank, with this Noel character, where he's seeing that you have to be able to kind of pull your own ego down to where you actually have compassion once again for people.
Yeah, because it feels clear to the audience, and clearly not clear to Frank, that all of his despair over not saving people is about himself. It's not grief for the lives lost, it's shame for him not doing what he thought he was supposed to do. And it was pride, right? And that moment where he loses his pride is the moment that he turns that corner. Because all of that haunting had made him really disgusted by people. Because now, instead of people being independent agents with dignity, they were potential failures.
Right.
And so that is such a probably a much more universal thought, that if you start to see people as only markers of your personal success, as soon as things start going south, every human being looks like a potential failure. And that is a horrible way to look at other people. And to connect it to Travis Bickle, he sees people as either pure or a threat to purity. And so he sees Sybil Shepherd's character, he sees Jodie Foster's character. These are potential purity. And everybody else is
scum of the earth.
Scum of the earth. Going to bring them down.
And it'd be best if they were just wiped away.
Right. And that's where there's a strong connection, because that is where Frank is at. It would be better if Noel wasn't there, Mr. O wasn't there, if these people didn't exist.
And yes, and I think that's a combo of what you're talking about, where he's seeing these people as a failure, but it's also the environment. And I've never seen a movie that really, I think, in an exaggerated way, shows just the reality of what we talk about sometimes as compassion fatigue.
Yep.
You know, like, this is someone who is just, he's overworked and he's done this long enough. And actually there was this is from an article I read by Fran Del Pizzo called Bringing Out the Dead, Scorsese's Tale of Guilt and Compassion. But she brings in this part that was in Schrader's first draft screenplay, where it started by saying after World War I, it was called shell shock. After World War II, it was called battle fatigue. After Vietnam, it was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. Frank Pierce drives an EMS vehicle for Our Lady of Mercy Hospital in New York City. He has been a paramedic for 5 years. That's actually how the first draft of the screenplay read. That at least according to this, and it's cited as Paul Schrader Bringing Out the Dead first draft screenplay 1997.
Wow.
And what I think is important to think about this is it's everything you're saying about him internalizing this as basically seeing everything as a success or failure of him. But it's also just a very straightforward, he's got post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
First of all. And second of all, he's in a line of work where if you're overworked, you just have compassion fatigue. You stop caring about these people. Yeah. You look at all the people in the hospital working.
I was going to say that.
And the way that they even just talk to the patients, and you get it. Like, it's not like you're looking at these people thinking they're awful people, but you realize they're doing what they have to do because this is an overrun hospital.
Right.
What else can they do? I mean, I can't imagine. Like,
nope, you need to go. Nope, get them in here.
And like on a way, way, way smaller scale with way smaller stakes, and not in a hellscape New York City in the late 90s.
Prepare to be canceled. Say it.
It happens in my line of work in the library, where you're just sitting at the reference desk, and after a while, you just have days, especially if you just know you need to take a break or you need a vacation or something. You just have days where you're just like, I don't want to deal with this person again. Mm-hmm. And you really forget that you were there to help people. You got into this because you wanted to make the world better. Mm-hmm. You wanted to actually be a true source of help for people in their time of need. Yeah. And I just think this movie does a really good job of showing like how your environment and being exposed in that line of work to just trauma after trauma after trauma, they all have different ways of dealing with it. Frank is just someone I think that just almost seems like he is just dead set on not losing that compassion, and it's driving him nuts.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
or you just realize that the problems are so much bigger than you.
Yeah. Like there's a thing where you start to resent the people you have compassion for because it's draining you so badly.
Yes.
And
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
And that's what he's experiencing. And maybe what is coming up in the movie is this idea of like constantly reconfiguring your idea of compassion, because since he hadn't done that, saving people meant saving a life. It then turned him in on himself so that the compassion wasn't there anymore. It was this guilt. And he felt like in place of compassion, guilt will suffice. I can show that I cared about those people by feeling guilty for not saving them.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be like fatigue for that. And you're ultimately going to never feel guilty. You're going to become a sociopath like Tom Sizemore's character.
Mm-hmm.
But that switch from compassion to guilt is not being able to acknowledge that I can't do everything, so I'll move on, which can feel callous, but you have to.
Right.
And so that, to me, another like extremely poignant line is when he asks Mary to forgive him because he couldn't save her father. And she says, no one asked you to suffer. Yeah. That was your idea.
Your idea. Yeah.
And that is absolutely true with that sort of suffering. When you are so focused on your own failures that you suffer as penance, and nobody asked you to, and you're not helping anybody by doing that.
Right.
It's just such an incredible depiction of burnout.
Yeah.
Like you said, compassion fatigue, but just burnout. If you've got any sort of job, I mean, as a teacher, definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, I could every day wake up and beat myself up over what I haven't done the days before. But that's going to make me cause further deficiencies by not doing what needs to be done today. One of my favorite scenes is the first scene at the Oasis. I'm still not sure what to make of it.
The Oasis scene?
Yeah.
When he takes the drug?
Right, because everything Cy is telling him is true.
Did you give Mary something called Red Death?
Excuse me? Red Death. Tell me something, Frank. Does killing your clients sound like good business sense to you? See, the kids selling their Red Death and just trying to make a quick buck. They don't got no respect for me or the work I done in this community. But don't worry, they're gonna be taken care of. I got Tiger working on it.
I should be going. I just quit.
Oh, look, sleep is all stress reduction, all right? Here. Now, if you take one of these, sleep for 2 hours, that's all you need. Why do you think I'm telling you this, Frank? For my health? Now, brother, you gotta look at yourself in the mirror, all right? Kenita, would you get our new friend here a glass of water, please?
And he takes the drug, and then the vision is of him helping people out of the concrete, and then those people are helping other people out of the concrete. It's like getting close. He's starting to see that idea that other people can help other people, but he's still the one pulling people first, right? Like he hasn't fully reached it. And so it's this scene where we're like, oh no, Mary, she just went and used again.
Right.
Then it's like, oh, but Frank is close to getting it, like in that situation.
Well, and I also go back to the last scene. There's another component of this where when you dedicate your life to help people, it's kind of a simple idea, but also the movie is just sort of at the end saying that if you're not getting that from anybody else, your tank's just empty.
Right.
You know, that like
you need other people.
And that's a message for all of society. Like we all need to kind of give to each other.
Yeah.
You know, and Mary in that movie is the only one that's willing to kind of give anything to him.
Yeah. Like there was that one scene, I don't even remember what they were doing, but it was Frank talking to Mary. And it was very straightforward, shot, reverse shot. But then one time Mary's talking and it fades out and fades into a profile of her. Then it fades out and fades into a regular over-the-shoulder shot, and then it fades out and fades back into the opposite profile of her, and then it fades out and fades back into the conversation. And like, doesn't happen again in the movie.
Yeah.
And it only happens, it's very fast, relatively speaking, for a fade out and fade in. Is it just that Frank now sees her as an icon almost, you know? Like, now she's sort of...
her name is Mary.
Right.
So.
Well, and there's like Magdalene sides of her and like Virgin Mary sides to her. And it's interesting because Mary Magdalene needed to be saved by Jesus and Virgin Mary did not, you know? Right. And it's kind of not until he sees her as the one who doesn't need saving that he finally is able to be fed. We talked a bit about the end shot, and we mentioned the lighting, which is very clear and to me feels very Last Temptation of Christ final shot.
I mean, that movie ends with light.
Yep. But also, and it's not overt, so maybe I'm reading into it, but it became clear to me by the end that Mary was sort of a mother of Jesus figure. The final shot is very like the Pietà to me, where she's kind of holding his body, sort of like he's not dead, you know, like the classic Pietà sculptures, but he is laying down on her, and she is, you know, the one holding him, which I thought was an interesting kind of
it's very maternal
reference. Yeah, so I don't know. He just makes all these choices that are just like, again, even if you didn't get the movie in 1999, how could you not be like, something's happening?
Yeah, or how could you not even just be like, it's a great Scorsese movie. I mean, it's got the music in it.
Yeah,
you know, like
it's got the needle drops. It's got the great score.
Yeah,
it's just
what wasn't there. I don't know. You know,
how insane can you have a quintessential Scorsese movie that is thoroughly unpredictable and like nothing you've seen from him before?
That's true. Yeah,
truly.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know. Great Nicolas Cage performance. Great Paul Schrader script. Great Martin Scorsese.
Great supporting
film.
cast performances.
Yeah.
Patricia Arquette's great. Is there a reason that this would be 4.5 and not 5?
I don't know. Well, I don't think this is fair, but where would you see this in kind of a ranking of Scorsese?
I was trying to think about that, and I was thinking I want to rewatch the movies before I would do that.
I kind of hate myself for even doing I think it's fine if we want to rank them.
How dare you?
But what I hate is when like a band you love or a director you love put out something that by any measure, if any other band or any other director had put it out, it would be like classic, phenomenal, amazing. Yeah. But because it's just one of several,
of their amazing stuff. Yeah.
It gets kind of like knocked for not being your favorite one.
Right.
And maybe I'm doing a little bit of that with this movie where I don't know still if it's one of my, it is probably getting, as we're talking about it, maybe climbing up there. There's still parts of this movie I don't really know what to do with.
Sure.
I think the Oasis scene maybe is one of those. Like, I don't know.
Which maybe it doesn't need to do something.
No, I mean, honestly, you know.
Like that's sort of part of the mystery that you mentioned Scorsese being so good and comfortable.
Right. Yeah. I'm still kind of wrestling with it. You know, ask me in a few days and maybe it will be a 5-star movie. But there are some movies where it's like I immediately just know, like, wow.
That did it for you.
And this one is one that I had to, you know, I've had to kind of work through a little bit. And that's not a knock against it in any way.
It's almost too complex and dense to...
Right, there's...
To be so quick.
I'll be honest, like, I still just find it hard to watch how gritty this movie is. Like, there are parts of this movie where I'm still kind of like, you know, like when they're rounding up the guy who smells so bad and, you know, it's just, there's a confrontation in some of these Scorsese movies that I still find hard to watch. Sure. And I don't know how to process it. I don't think Scorsese knows how to process it. Sure. It's part of the beauty of his movies that like, he just puts it there.
Right.
Because it's just as false to pretend like it's not there.
Right.
And so, like, there's sort of a clean way that we're talking about this movie, where we're talking about, like, you know, things about compassion, and this is this is sort of the neat and tidy.
It's oversimplifying it.
resolution that Frank comes to, and this is how he kind of overcomes it, and this is how these three guys, but like the movie still has these like scenes that are like, it's hard for me to think about the fact that we have almost areas of cities that are like this and that have failed people like this badly, and that there are people who are this destitute, this low, this, it's a fact of life. It's real. Do you know what I'm getting at? Like,
yes, I do. Yeah.
Now, that sounds weird for me. Like, that's why it's not 5 stars, because I just can't handle that.
I get it, though. Like, we've talked about 5 stars being a personal thing, but I think part of a 5 star is you see yourself wanting to watch it again, or you know, like that. I think that half star is sort of an enjoyment half star.
It could be.
And I do love this movie and respect it, and certainly love the way he made it and the depth of how it's talking about what it's talking about. Yeah, I don't know. I now I'm feeling the way you were feeling. Like, it's challenging, so 4.5.
It's challenging in the best way.
Right.
But this isn't some made up dystopia hellscape, Well,
my initial reaction was like, was it really like this? And I'm like, well, if anybody's trusted to make a New York movie, it's Martin Scorsese.
Right.
Maybe Spike Lee would be number one above him of living filmmakers, but
let me tell you, even Spike Lee, I mean, Do the Right Thing is a challenging movie itself, but you still, there's something about Do the Right Thing where you're like, it seems like a really kind of cool neighborhood. Right. Do you know what I mean? Sure. Like,
yeah,
this is a New York. It's just scary.
Yeah, it's a place of death.
Yeah,
like,
so I don't know.
You don't have to make it 5. I was asking for myself too.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm coming off right though, as far as like I'm reacting the way Scorsese wants you to react. You know what I mean?
Right,
that's the purpose. The intent is for him to kind of show you these parts of society that we don't want to look at. We want to pretend don't exist.
Right. And I think I don't think you're saying because of that, I can't give it 5 stars. I think you're saying it's too complex a movie to put such a definitive
interpretation
stamp on it of 5 stars. And
I see. Yeah.
You want to we just need to sit with it. And who knows, maybe the more you sit with it, the more I sit with it, it will feel like, yeah, that was a 5-star experience.
There are some movies that I will watch and immediately be like, that's a 5-star movie. And then there's other movies that I need to watch 2 or 3 times, because every time I watch it, I appreciate a little bit more. I appreciate something new about it. And I kind of say to myself, well, if a movie can be that rewarding over and over again, or maybe if I don't even rewatch it multiple times, but just over a couple days, I just think about new things about it that it kind of raises, and it sticks with me, and it doesn't just leave. It doesn't just become a movie that I saw and it came and went.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of like, okay, I need to go back and dock that up to 5 stars. But I do want to ask you though, before we kind of wrap this up, because I think it's an interesting question. You technically had seen this before.
Yeah.
So how do you think it goes from, like, is it just a stage of your life now that you watch it and it's just like, I'm just seeing this differently?
I think I'm a better movie watcher now. I don't remember the circumstances I watched it in. Like maybe I was distracted, or I wasn't really, maybe I was tired and I just powered through, and whatever. Maybe I wasn't ready to see the nuance of it because it takes work. I think we saw it with a lot of the critics. If you don't want to work at it with this movie, or you just don't care to get it, then you can easily sit through the movie and be like, that was weird.
That was weird. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we're best buds.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's, we haven't been anything but best buds for a long time. So,
and maybe that's a
good thing.
Maybe that's just the spirit of the gap year.
It might be. Yeah.
I will say this was a great gap to fill in for Scorsese.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've scoured the internet for irrelevant IMDb trivia.
Got to do it.
And Nate, you've got one.
I wouldn't call it irrelevant. I think it's just another way that Scorsese broke ground.
Okay.
Did you know?
Much like this podcast.
This, along with Sleepy Hollow, 1999, these were the last movies to be released on the Laserdisc format.
Wow.
In North America.
The last 2. 1999, they were still making new Laserdiscs?
Really just for Sleepy Hollow and Bringing Out the Dead, I think.
I guess so. Yeah. Huh.
So, next time you dust off that Sleepy Hollow laser disc.
Yeah, that's a collector's item.
It's got to be.
It's the last one made.
I got to imagine.
Somebody has the last laser disc ever made.
And it's
either Sleepy Hollow or Bringing Out the Dead.
And I think I would venture to guess that Bringing Out the Dead might even be harder to find on Laserdisc than Sleepy Hollow. I don't know why, but when you go to a lot of record stores, they also sell Laserdiscs. Yeah. And if you see a Bringing Out the Dead Laserdisc, snag that thing up because that is one of the last Laserdiscs ever to be made.
Yeah.
So irrelevant?
Who knows? I mean, not to the person who's going to make thousands of dollars selling the
you heard it here. I imagine we're going to see on Antiques Roadshow a couple years from now someone bringing out the Dead
This is a movie that people don't really know about. Director Martin Scorsese, who's actually known for directing the 8th Captain America movie.
Right. I'm imagining that guy in the weird suit and ponytail that does all like the posters in Antiques Roadshow. He's gonna know.
He's gonna be the one.
He's
gonna
be the guy that knows the value of that Bringing Out the Dead laser disc. I just know it. So,
I'm sure he will.
Anyways, that's my piece. What do you got?
Mine, I actually there wasn't a ton unless you're interested in like ambulance tech.
I am
technical ambulance knowledge
very much.
I'm not, so I didn't pick it, but I made up my own.
What?
Irrelevant IMDb trivia.
That's so irrelevant.
I didn't post it on IMDb.
It's not even on IMDb.
It's not on there. You're hearing it for the first time. This is, to my knowledge, one of 2 movies,
Sleepy Hollow,
from 1999, to involve someone falling onto a metal fence and impaling themselves.
Okay. Wait.
The other one's a lot more serious than this one.
There's some impaling in Braveheart, I think.
Not on a fence.
I think
this is somebody who falls on a fence, is impaled, and stays on the fence.
Well, I think you got me.
It might be now of poor taste since we were kind of joking about it, but the Virgin Suicides. That's how the youngest sister ends up killing herself.
All right. Well, it must have been a thing in 99.
Oh, I do remember Joel Siegel saying like, I've had enough of people being impaled on fences. We saw it in Virgin Suicides. It was hack then. It's even more hack in Bringing Out the Dead.
Right.
Anyway, all that to say, we think you should watch Bringing Out the Dead. And we're going to tell you about our next movie, which we're kind of doing our thing where we do 2 months on, 1 month off. Yeah. So we're taking September off, but we will be back for our holiday spooktacular in October.
Tis the season.
Tis the season already, folks.
Going so fast. We're taking a break
now. There's a break, yeah.
But yeah,
whatever.
It's going to be right around the corner.
It will be anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be our 10th
10 years
holiday spooktacular.
But man, 10 years. That's quite.
It's a lifetime.
Hey, before we announce this spooktacular, this is just a good time to say go dig through those archives. We got a month off.
Yep.
So you got plenty of time to go through and catch up on some horror movies.
We got another Scorsese episode. You can go back and listen to our Departed episode with guest Ian Singleton.
Great episode. It was a lot of fun.
You can listen to any of our spooktaculars because 'tis the season.
Tis the season. Soon. But yeah, this season we are going to be doing a movie that honestly we were just talking about it a little bit off mic, and a little bit newer of a movie, but
a little bit.
A couple years old, but still has reached that level of we really should be filling in this
Everybody's
gap.
Already seen it.
Yeah.
Now, I'll be honest, I've heard some divided opinions on this. Some people are overrated, and some people are a new master of horror. And you've probably figured it out already.
You think from that?
We're talking about Ari Aster's Hereditary. Now, we've both seen Midsommar.
I love Midsommar.
You love it. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Didn't love it as much as you did. I've talked to some people who really didn't like this movie, thought it was dumb. I've talked to a lot of people who think it's great.
Yeah.
And
so we're going to find out where we land on that.
Pretty much on the strength of Hereditary, Ari Aster's gotten to make whatever he wants, it feels like. So, for that reason, it feels like a movie we should have seen by now. And the truth is, we're a little afraid to. Every time we talk about what we're going to watch for the Spooktacular, 10 years now, we've been like, yeah, I guess I can watch that. Because we're both still kind of those kids that we talk about every spooktacular. I mean, it's a holiday spooktacular tradition. The kids who are afraid of the horror section in the video store.
We'll never get over that.
Yeah.
We'll never get over that. And I honestly, there are still horror movies that get to me.
Sure.
I mean, I think a couple of years ago, we talked about The Conjuring. I don't know what it was about that one, but there was a night or two where I was like, what was that? Yeah. Whenever I heard like a little noise.
Yeah.
And do you know anything about this movie? Because I really don't. Like, I mean, I know who's in it. You know, I know Toni Collette.
It's about a young girl.
Is it?
I don't know. Looks like it.
From what I gathered, it seems pretty small scale. Like, does it all take place in a house? Or
I don't know. I don't think so.
No? See, I know nothing.
Yeah, I don't really know much about it either.
But I do know that we've at least got a few listeners out there who are big Ari Aster fans. So I think it would be great to maybe get some context beforehand. Like what is it?
What do we? Well, unless it's one of those movies that it's best if you don't know.
Then don't say anything.
Unless by best you mean scarier, then let us know. We don't need it to be any scarier.
I don't need to be 40 years old in my bed saying, "What is that?" Like putting the covers over my head.
Yeah, with a flashlight.
Well, that's what we're going to be watching, and we do hope that you watch it with us.
Yeah, and get into the holiday spirit with us.
Right. But, you know, we'll be heading into fall by the time we come back, and so it will definitely feel like spooktacular season.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to...
Twill.
It's both a gap year and a spooktacular. Two things to celebrate.
Breaking that new ground.
Breaking the ground. Yeah.
Although I don't think this is the first time we've watched something for the first time for a spooktacular.
No, but
it is the first time during a gap year.
It's the first time that we've labeled it as such.
Yep, it's true.
So
you can't take that away.
Nope. So anyways, we hope that you definitely will watch that with us, and that maybe you will take the time during this month off to go back through some of our past episodes and catch up a little bit. We'd love it if you did that. But anyways, we'd love to hear from you, to listen to or comment on this or any of our past episodes. Find us at canwestillbefriends.net or email us at feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. You can find us on Facebook at Can We Still Be Friends Podcast or Instagram at Can We Still Be Friends Pod. I think we still are on Threads.
As long as that's kicking.
Is that going to happen? I don't know. I feel like I should know.
What's weird about Threads is that X is so demonstrably horrible.
Right.
But I wonder if people are sort of like, it's all bad.
Do we need any of this?
Yeah.
But we are there. We
were there, yeah.
We were there. We are there. I think so.
We were mad at Twitter before you guys.
That's right. X.
If
you'd like to leave us a voice message and perhaps be featured on the podcast, you can call us at 847-306-9532 or email us a voice memo.
Yeah, and always, we'd love it if you could subscribe and leave a rating or review at Apple Podcasts. Those ratings really help spread the word about our show. Can We Still Be Friends is written and produced by Ryan Ebling and Nate Goss and edited by Nate Goss. Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time.